So thank you everybody for joining today's session. My name is Annie Foster and I'm the Operations Manager here at the Global Compact Network Switzerland-Liechtenstein, and I'm joined by my colleague Tabea Berglin, who is our Programs Manager on Social Sustainability, ESG Reporting and Regulations. So a few housekeeping rules. So this session is being recorded. You'll receive a recording after the session. So this will and we will also share the slides. So you don't need to take any screenshots, and this will allow you to hopefully fully concentrate on today's content. Please stay muted during the webinar. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and unmute yourself, or type them into the chat. We would also appreciate it if you can. It helps if you activate your camera. It helps us to feel a little bit less lonely. And please use the naming convention of your first name, last name, and company name. It helps us to identify those online. So in terms of what we would like to cover today, we will give you a brief introduction into the Global Compact, and then we'll move into an overview of the Communication of Progress, or COP, and its requirements and advantages. Tabea will guide you through the preparation and content of the COP, and we'll have a closer look at how to complete and submit the report. You will also receive an overview of the data visualization tool, which offers you insights into the process of our business participants in advancing the 10 principles. We will also cover the reporting requirements for those who have committed to the Forward Faster, and we will guide you with an overview of our resources and supporting material to support you in the completion of your report. And at the very end, hopefully we'll have enough time to answer any questions which you may have. It's a pretty full packed agenda, so let's get started. So the Global Compact is a global network with more than 60 country networks, and we are the local chapter here in Switzerland-Liechtenstein. Our role is to support our participants to act in line with the United Nations 10 principles, as well as helping companies to find solutions to the Sustainable Development Goals. Our core tenets are along the 4 pillars of human rights, environment, labour rights, and anti-corruption. And in Switzerland-Liechtenstein, we have around 340 business participants in our network, and there's a mixture of large corporations and SMEs. We define SMEs as organizations with fewer than 250 employees. So on a global scale, we have around 24,000 organizations in the network worldwide. So this makes us the biggest corporate sustainability initiative on the planet. And there are many ways to engage in our network. In the top part of this diagram, you'll get an overview of our focus areas, and the bottom part is ways to engage. So regardless of whether you're a large corporation or an SME, at the beginning of the sustainability topics, you'll find many ways to engage. And remember that it's not limited to your sustainability staff, it's for all employees within your organization. So all of our programs are included in your membership, and there are no extra costs beyond the annual contribution. You can attend events and webinars if you want to build your knowledge and expand your network. If you want more in-depth training courses on certain topics, then maybe the Accelerator program is for you. If you want to exchange good practices with like-minded professionals or commiserate on certain topics, then maybe you might consider joining our peer learning groups. If you want on-demand content at your convenience, the Global Compact Academy, our online learning platform, may be suitable. If you want to stay ahead of the curve and stay informed, use our tools and resources. To make change from within, you need to empower your staff with the knowledge and training to do so. And at the Global Compact, our role is to provide you with the knowledge, tools, and dialogue to facilitate this. So when you join the Global Compact, one of the key components of your commitment is to report on an annual basis. And this is detailed in the original letter of commitment, which was signed by your highest level executive when you committed to join. Reporting to stakeholders in a transparent and public manner is fundamental for companies committed to sustainability, and the COP serves as a good starting point. So the COP is our primary mechanism for our participants to demonstrate their progress along the lines of the 10 principles of the Global Compact and the Sustainable Development Goals. Our online questionnaire has evolved to meet the increasing demand of our stakeholders for consistent, reliable, and corporate sustainability reporting. So our 10 principles are listed here. They're derived from from key international agreements, and we'll dive into a little bit more detail of this later on. So why should you report, or why do you need the report? So the digital COP report or COP questionnaire brings you a lot of several benefits. You can build your credibility and brand value through the COP by disclosing and demonstrating your commitment to the sustainability and 10 principles. Through the COP, you can measure your progress along the 10 principles in a standardized way and to demonstrate through to your stakeholders and to the public. You can gain continuous insights into relevant topics on sustainability reporting, and you can learn and improve on your results year after year. The COP also gives you an opportunity to compare your progress to that of your competitors, and it gives you access to one of the largest sources of free, public, and comparable corporate sustainability data. So the components of the COP, there are two components. So we have the CEO Statement of Continued Support. It's a public declaration of your company's ongoing commitment to the 10 principles at the highest level. To submit the COP, participants are required to confirm this commitment by having your CEO or an authorized representative to sign the standardized template. This statement is integrated into the platform, so it doesn't require a separate file. Second part is the online questionnaire or sustainability report. So the COP questionnaire is a standardized questionnaire with around 70 questions, and it provides you with a framework to measure along the lines of the 10 principles. Alternatively, this year, you do still have the option to upload a sustainability report instead of completing the questionnaire. It's important to note that the COP and its supporting materials will be publicly available upon submission. If you want to submit a sustainability report, we define this as a disclosure or a publication that gives you a comprehensive overview of your organization's activities and sustainability efforts, reflecting your improvements, your challenges, and progress made within the reporting period. So while explicit ties are not mandatory, the report should cover topics relating to the 10 principles of the Global Compact and the Sustainable Development Goals. So let's take a look at the deadlines. Ideally, January to March is the preparation and data gathering phase. This is the time to get all the necessary information and to align internally. And from the 1st of April is when the COP reporting period starts. 31st of July marks the last day of the submission period and before becoming non-communicating. So your COP can be submitted anytime between these two dates. From the 1st of August, all our business participants who submit is a time that you need to submit to be listed as active on our website. Those who miss the 31 July deadline will be marked as non-communicating starting in August. So you still have the opportunity to submit until the 31st of December to gain an active status. 31 December is the last day to submit your COP before becoming delisted from the Global Compact. And the 1st of January 2026 is when participants who failed to submit their 2025 COP will become delisted from the Global Compact. So at this stage of the year, there are two key dates for you to keep in mind. The 31st of July is your deadline to submit. So if you don't, you become non-communicating until you submit. And 31 December is the last day for you to submit. If you don't submit by this date, you will become delisted from the Global Compact as of the 1st of January 2026.
Thank you so much, Annie, for the introduction to the communication on progress, and hello, everyone. So to work on your COP, essentially makes sense for you to have an overview of the sections and number of questions that need to be answered compared to last year, which you can see on the slide. And this is no matter whether you're new to the COP or have completed the questionnaire already, I think this is a good overview. So why has this happened, this update? Essentially received a lot of feedback from participants last year on how the COP could be improved. The UNGC, so the UN Global Compact, has taken this feedback to revise the COP questionnaire and come up with a version where questions produce valuable data, are also not confusing and repetitive, as we've heard some of the feedback. So we've really optimized and upgraded the questionnaire in that sense. Background to the COP. So you can see here there are 4 mandatory sections: governance, human rights and labor, environment and anti-corruption, and also maybe keep in mind the abbreviations. So governance G, human rights and labor HRL, environment E, and anti-corruption AC, as this is continuously used also in the question numbers and namings. So you'll know that if you see a question with AC, this is related to anti-corruption. All of these are, of course, in line with our 10 principles, as previously mentioned by Annie. New in the 2025 version, the human rights and labor section has been merged, which you can see by adding the questions from 2024, 9 and 14, which is new, a total of only 14 questions in that sense. You can also see that we have a total of 36 mandatory questions for 2025 versus 52 from last year, and a total overall number of questions of 66 versus 76 from last year. A new section that we have, which is not mandatory, but I've actually noticed a lot of participants have appreciated and already completed, is the so-called success stories and future plans. This section provides an opportunity for you to highlight and showcase any successful projects or any new policies that you've implemented or anything that you're particularly proud of, to also allow us to better understand how we can support you and tailor any of our offerings for you. The majority of questions are structured in multiple choice questions or also single choice matrices. However, the questionnaire also contains questions in quantitative and narrative formats. So you can really see on the right-hand side, 77% are multiple choice, then we have 15% that are quantitative and 8% that are narrative that allow you to elaborate as much as you wish. Every question does include a please provide additional information text box, which can be quite useful in the sense and provides you with a lot of flexibility. So here you can include a lot of context for the answers that you have selected, or elaborate if one of the best suited answers is not entirely the most suited answer in your opinion. You can elaborate on how you wish to kind of optimize the answer to the question. This text box is optional. And if one question does not apply or make sense to an organization, this could be basically due to size, industry, or anything else. This is where you can also select not applicable, and then again provide a brief explanation in the additional text box, which can also then be mandatory in some cases. For the 2025 reporting year, I also want to point out that we also accept any CSRD related reports. This can be uploaded via the platform in place of a COP questionnaire. So if that is something of interest to you, this is also possible for the 2025 submission. Then moving on to the COP introduction, previously mentioned, the questionnaire is structured into 4 thematic sections. So the first section that you can see is the kind of what I would say in that sense pre-section, because it's not mandatory, the success stories and future priorities. Then we move on to the 4 sections, which are governance, the first section providing a cross-cutting overview of your sustainability governance structure. Then we have the 3 other sections: human rights and labor, environment, and anti-corruption. And these try to survey the performance in more detail with respect to the 10 principles. Within each section of the questionnaire, the questions are grouped into different categories as they typically address the processes and policies that you demonstrate commitment to advancing sustainability topics, also the efforts that you've taken to prevent negative social environmental impacts on those topics, and performance indicators and the response and remediation. But I'll get into that into a little bit more detail in a moment. The human rights and labor and environment sections also contain an additional nuance, where the human rights and labor section provides companies the opportunity to select topics they believe are material to their organization for any additional disclosure. And the environmental section similarly includes additional topic-specific questions that are to be answered only by business participants that consider such topics to be material. So depending on how many you select here, you might have more questions that you need to be answering or not. Again, in some cases, you might be asked a question that you actually do not consider as material. In this case, you can also select not applicable. So you really have a lot of flexibility when working with the questionnaire. So since the UN Global Compact participants are required to demonstrate progress towards the 10 principles, each question of our COP is designed to address these principles, and you can really see that in this table, which provides an overview of how each of the 10 principles is incorporated into the questionnaire. At the top, you can see the 4 topic areas and the ones that previously mentioned, and on the left-hand side, you can see the 4 sections from the COP. And I think it's also very clear here that governance is cross-cutting across all sections in the COP. So here we have the COP question categories. The questions in the COP are structured in a similar way and can be classified into one of these, which is materiality, commitment, prevention, performance, and finally response and reporting. So for materiality, this aims to decide which topics are relevant for your company. We have this mentioned in human rights and labor section, as well as in the environmental section. Then we have the commitment, which aims to find out more about your topic-specific policies and also the last time that they have been reviewed. For each topic related to policy commitment, it continues by finding out more about its state. For instance, is it aligned with any relevant international standards? Is it available publicly, approved at most senior level, and so on. Then we have prevention. How are the risks recognized and avoided? These questions aim to find out more about the risk management processes that you have in place, whether you engage with stakeholders, and what the engagement might have looked like, the actions taken with the aim of preventing and or mitigating the risks and or impacts. Then we have the performance section, which measurable goals and key performance indicators have you set or put in place. And finally, we have response and reporting, whether the company has been involved in providing or enabling remedy, where it has caused or contributed to adverse impacts related to, for example, human rights, or whether it has taken any action where to address suspected incidents of corruption. So those are some examples, but we'll dive deeper into that in a moment as well. Here you can see an overview of the structure of the questionnaire and the categorization of questions within it. So this table really helps visualize how the questions are allocated along the different question categories according to these 4 sections, again, within the COP. And also, I think later on, if you're working with the COP, these tables are quite useful to see, okay, which data do I need to collect? For example, you can go straight to the performance questions that are listed in this table and find out what exactly it is that you need or are interested in, depending on that question category. So here we have the pre-questions, in a way, the pre-R questions that are asked to all participants before submitting the questionnaire, or also if they decide to upload a sustainability report. Note that this example is taken from the PDF version, and I'll be using a lot of insights from the PDF, as I do really think it's recommendable to work with it, and also just to provide insights into the questionnaire itself. So it does look a little bit different in the on the digital platform. If you choose to upload the sustainability report, so you can select that in R1, and then you will be prompted to answer another question, which is R2, which is also for the questionnaire. What is the time period covered by your communication on progress? You can also see the hints that are quite useful. So for example, you can only select one in the first question in R1, then R2, what is the period covered by your communication in progress? So here, make sure that you stick to the designated format, because otherwise you might receive an error, which we've also heard back. So really do try to stick to that. And then you also have the optional R3 question, and you can see in brackets here. So it's a really good guide in terms of understanding what is optional, what do I need to answer, how many options can I select, so keep an eye out for that. So if you do decide to upload a sustainability report in R1, you will then answer R2, and then you will actually receive R4 as another question. And R4 is essentially just the part where you'll be able to upload your sustainability report. So moving on to the new section, success stories and future priorities. This is what it looks like. You can see here the first question is, within the reporting period, is there an initiative, project, or policy which you're particularly proud of? You can select which effort it relates to and also provide any additional information. And then S2, which of the 5 issue areas does the company plan to prioritize in the next 2 years? So this one is mandatory, and then you can just select on the left-hand side as many as you would like. And you can tell that this is a question that allows you to select multiple because the options are all square boxes. Moving on to the first part, question type, we have materiality. For this, I would like to briefly let you know how it is defined for the COP. So here we use GRI3 material topics definition. Material topics are topics that represent the organization's most significant impacts on the economy, environment, and people, including impacts on their human rights. These topics will represent your organization's material topics. Impacts can have either negative or positive consequences for your organization itself, with these impacts being operational, reputational, and also in many cases, financial. So determining your material topics, this is a brief overview of that. The process of identifying these topics may differ from company to company, but will usually be informed by the organization's ongoing identification and assessment processes. During the first 3 steps that you can see on the left-hand side, you will identify and assess your company's impacts regularly as part of day-to-day activities while engaging relevant stakeholders and experts. Start off by understanding your organization's context, identifying actual and potential impacts, and then assessing the significance of those impacts, which is when you move on to step 4, where you will have to prioritize the most significant impacts and then determining your material topics. So this remains the same for the COP, the process for that. Here we have an example from the Human Rights and Labor section, materiality. Which of the following has the company identified as material human and labor rights topics connected with its operations and or value chain? So the process for gauging these human rights risks should draw on internal and or independent external human rights expertise. They should also involve meaningful consultation with potentially affected groups and other relevant stakeholders as appropriate to the size of your business and the nature and context of the operation. When selecting the topics material to your organization, regardless of your choices, you'll be required to answer questions related to the labor topic. So you have freedom of association and the right to collective bargaining, child labor, forced labor, non-discrimination in employment and occupation, and a safe and healthy working environment, as well as the related gender topics, gender equality and women's rights. So no matter whether you've selected those as material or not, these questions will still pop up. Note that as the identification of material topics is an organization-specific task, the COP contains questions to the 10 principles that relates to material topics that affect all business partners, again, regardless of size, geography, or sector. And in addition, like mentioned previously, you can select your own specific topics for disclosure in the human rights and environment section. And again, if something is immaterial for your organization, select not applicable if appropriate. Then we have another example taken from the environmental section. In this question, your organization is required to select the environmental topics that are considered most material. Additional questions will be prompted depending on your chosen material topics, and you can tell, for example, climate change, oceans, energy, and resource use will not prompt any further questions, but water, nature, and biodiversity, air pollution, waste, these will prompt further questions. So I really do recommend using the PDF so you can see how the questionnaire builds on itself, and also as it is more flexible than working with the digital platform. So fill out the PDF and then move on to the digital questionnaire with every data and information that you've already gathered. So moving on to our first frequently asked question, is it all right if our company only chooses one material topic? So in the case that you only have one or none of the topics that are material for the company, this should be indicated. It is also advisable, again, to use the additional text box option here. So this really does provide that flexibility that you might need in any given circumstance or question. Then we have, how is the principle of double materiality taken into account in the COP questionnaire? Here, I'd like to point out that the COP has been designed with interoperability in mind, which simply put means that participants can apply the same approach to the COP as they would when reporting with GRI or CSRD. And this applies to materiality as well as the concept of double materiality. So I think that is very well planned by the GCO in terms of how they are trying to build up the COP and make sure that everything adds up. Then we have commitment. So like previously mentioned, the commitment category questions aim to find out more about existing policies and the last time they have been reviewed. Here, a key definition would be that this policy commitment refers to any one or more publicly available statements of the company's responsibilities, commitments, or expectations with regard to the topic across its activities and business relationships. Again, you can see that its interoperability is signaled by here referencing the UNGP reporting framework as well. Here we have an example from the Human Rights and Labor section. Does the company have a policy commitment in relation to the following human rights and labor topics? If you have a policy commitment, a link or other supporting document can be included as well. Do keep in mind that your submission is public, so anything that you include will be able, other people will be able to see and look into. So if there's something that is only internal, you can reference that you have this, but don't include any links or upload any documents in that case. Here you can specify specifically whether you have plans to develop a policy or whether this will be within the next 2 years, that you have a policy within a broader policy, included in a broader policy or as a standalone policy. And again, you can see which questions will be prompted depending on which answer you select here. Again, you can also select not applicable and then explain why this might not be applicable to your organization. Here we have another example. So depending on your answers from the previous question, this one might be prompted. So here the commitment should be expressed in a policy statement that is approved at the most senior level of the business enterprise. Make sure that it is also relevant internal, informed by relevant internal or external expertise. It should stipulate the enterprise's human rights expectations of personnel, business partners, and other parties that are directly linked to operations, products, or services, and it should be publicly available, is reflected in operational policies and procedures necessary to also embed it throughout the business enterprise. So for example, here you can select the option that it is publicly available. And if it is not publicly available, then you just simply do not select this option. So that's not a problem. Also note that if a policy commitment only extends to a specific stakeholder in your value chain, such as tier 2 or 3, and not actually your organization itself, you can here select apply to the company's own operations and value chain, and then use the additional space provided to explain the further details. So what are the requirements for publication? The answer to this question is that the commitment should be published through the communication channels other than the COP. So this could include the company website, sustainability reports, and public interviews with the management, for example. Then we had another question. We have a guideline policy statement, however, it is not public. So I think I briefly touched on that. How should we answer this question? You can specify the guidelines policy statements that are not publicly available. And then again, in the follow-up question, it will ask whether the guideline is publicly available. So we've left some room to maneuver here and you to be able to answer the questions as good as possible. Moving on to the next section, we have prevention. So here we have two key definitions that I would like to point out at this stage: risk assessment and effective due diligence process. It is important to note here that these are mutually exclusive and one can occur without the other. So there was some confusion regarding that. So we have the risk assessment in the COP. This is defined as it focusing on how sustainability issues affect an organization and encompasses risks to the business, including financial risks, operational risks, transition risks, environmental risks, strategic risks, and so on, which is distinct from a due diligence process, which addresses potential and actual negative impacts on the people and environment. So here we also have some tips on the effective due diligence process. It should cover the adverse impacts that the business might have caused or contributed to through its own activity or might be directly linked to. It will also vary in complexity with the size and should be an ongoing process where it is recognized that adverse impacts can change over time as the business operations and operating context evolve. Furthermore, due diligence can also be quite costly for some organizations, requiring time and, of course, personnel to carry out. Therefore, for some organizations, including SMEs, maybe there are some here today, may not have the capacity or budget to implement this process when evaluating business opportunities or relationships. And this process should be, therefore, appropriate and proportionate. Therefore, if there is a limitation on the processes that you have in place, again, elaborate, explain. This is really a very transparent process, also for you to grow and benchmark yourself and compare to the previous year and how your company has evolved. So this question, G4, seeks to understand what processes are in place to identify social, environmental, and corruption risks to business with the end objective of guiding companies toward better performance. So if you have a process or processes to assess the risk beyond its own operations and suppliers, then you can select yes, focused on our own operations and the value chain. It should also be noted that this option is not necessarily all-encompassing and that you do not need to be actively addressing every business relationship in the value chain to actually be able to make the selection. We encourage you to briefly specify which business relationships in the value chain are addressed in space provided. Instead, again, you can see the please provide additional information box at the bottom. If you answer any option here besides no action within the reporting period, question E3.1 will pop up. No, I would like to go back to the stakeholder engagement definition. E3.1 will show up after. So here we can see the stakeholder engagement for the question category prevention. This is also an important definition to understand, where stakeholder engagement involves interactive processes of engagement with relevant stakeholders. Meaningful stakeholder engagement is characterized by two-way communication and depends on the good faith of the participants on both sides, meaning stakeholder engagement is a key component of due diligence process, and this is also referenced in the guidebook. So moving on from stakeholder engagement to the relevant question, in the prevention category, we also have human rights labor question 3, which asks whether the company engaged with potentially affected stakeholder or the legitimate representatives in relation to the following topics. So you can see here, it's asking, for example, how you've engaged, whether it's to better understand the risk impacts in question, whether to discuss potential ways to prevent or mitigate, or to agree on a way to prevent or mitigate, and so on. Involving stakeholders to lead up to the next question. So involving stakeholders, you can do this by gaining an understanding of the concerns of stakeholders, then involving experts, civil society, organizations, and academia, where necessary in consultations to seek to understand the concerns of the stakeholders by consulting them directly, taking into account, of course, language and other potential barriers. This can include cultural differences, gender and power imbalances, and also, of course, divisions within the population. And then the third is identifying and addressing potential barriers is necessary to ensure that the stakeholder engagement is effective. So therefore, keep in mind to engage with the right stakeholders and also the relevant number. Hear directly from affected stakeholders or credible proxies, and also always be aware of biases and stakeholder interests. So not everyone is a credible proxy, and this is valid for both local and international stakeholders. For instance, a very local stakeholder could turn out to actually not being credible proxy due to local circumstances such as political structures. So just some things to keep in mind when you're involving stakeholders. So then we have the next stakeholder involvement, which is related to question E3. So what type of action has the company taken within the reporting period with the aim of preventing and mitigating the risks impacts associated with the following environmental topics? Here we have some examples of how stakeholders can be involved building on question E3, this can be, for example, providing internal training or capacity building for the direct workforce. This could include hiring specialized individuals or third-party consultants whose role it is to provide this training or capacity building. And you can also build capacity among relevant relationships, referring to working with stakeholders outside of the direct workforce. Then we have the conducting an audit process, which can be defined as an on-site verification activity, such as an inspection or examination of a process or quality system to ensure compliance with requirements, typically also done by an independent party. Then we have committing to collective action with peers or other stakeholders, which might include collaboration on industry-wide initiatives or projects to work on products and/or services to help mitigate the risks and impacts of climate change. For example, if you're a part of or want to join the UN Global Compact Ocean Stewardship Coalition, that could be an option. Finally, we have collaborating with governmental or regulatory bodies. This could include policy influences, direct policy influences, such as providing testimony, endorsements, or participating in committees, participating in public-private partnerships, participating in national or international forums on trade, and so on and so on. So if you select any option in this question, other than no action within the reporting period, so by selecting, for instance, that you've used collective action, then the following question will be displayed. And now this is the question E3.1. So in this question, how does the company assess progress in preventing, mitigating the risks and impacts associated with the following environmental topics? You will be able to specify that the progress has not been monitored, that you are maybe reviewing topics on an ad hoc basis, or that you're setting annual targets and goals and tracking this progress over time, either for internal programs only, or both for internal and external programs, or other, because there's just sometimes always another option that is not listed, and we would always be happy to hear more about that. KPIs in place that you have might focus on inputs, so the allocation of resources and finances. For example, programmatic activities could focus on the number of environment trainings held and also the assessments and audits that you've conducted. Or finally, another KPI could focus on the basic outputs, such as audit non-conformances. Then we move on to the performance section. So this is a brief overview of the quantitative data that you will need for the COP submission, depending also on your materiality that you topics that you've selected. We have a data checklist included in our resources section as well, so you can just use that to make sure that you have all the data when you start working with the COP. For governance, for example, you might want to gather data on the composition of the highest governing body. So this includes gender, age, executive members, independent members, and I have an example on that later. Also proportion of women in managerial positions. Then for human rights and labor, we have the specific goals or targets that you've set for topics, the average gender pay gap, and also proportion of recordable work-related accidents. For environment, this is the most quantitative data loaded question, I would say, as you can also see. So you have the scope 1 and scope 2 GHG emissions, total water withdrawal and consumption, and so on. I won't go through the entire list, but it's quite extensive depending on your material topics in the section. And depending if you've not selected them, you will also not need to gather this data. So here we have another definition on equal remuneration, where the ILO defines equal remuneration for women and men and men workers for work of equal value in terms of rates of remuneration established without discrimination based on sex. So again, you can see that we're using the ILO definition here, and the metric for the percentage gap between female and male employees addresses the principle of gender equality, which stipulates equal pay for equal work. So this is a question in our COP questionnaire. And here you can see the formula for calculating your gender pay gap on the bottom, which is also included in the COP guidebook, as it's a really helpful tool to support you in working with the questionnaire. I also would like to point out the Women's Empowerment Principles Gap Analysis tool. Later in the slides, you can also click on this if you need further support and you're interested in learning more, as this tool can support you in assessing progress on gender equality, identifying strengths and areas for improvement to advance fair and equitable workplace practices. So this will support you in also improving your COP progression over time and reach those goals. Here we can see the question that or rather the data that you need that I mentioned previously. This is G9. Please provide details regarding the company's board highest governance body. Here we've received a lot of questions actually, as some have been struggling with the definitions and the correlation of executive and independent. So you can see here on the bottom, these two, executive and independent. So if you select known for one, you should also select the sum needs to add up to 100%, or if you select known for both, and they need to add up to 100%. So you will receive an error message if they don't add up to 100% here. We also have definitions that we advise you to use. I've added them to the slide on the bottom. So use the following definitions: for executive and independent, where executive board member is an individual who's employed by the company and actively participates in its day-to-day operations and strategic decision-making. In contrast, we have independent or also non-executive board members are not employed by the company and have no material relationship with the organization. So this was the middle ground to kind of make sure that all our 20,000 or 21,000 companies can answer the question to the best possible, as it's quite difficult to make sure that this question suits all, as everyone has a different board structure. Then we have E5.1, another example for performance-related question, asking your Scope 1 emissions, Scope 2 market-based, or Scope 2 location-based, and then you can just enter this data that you have here and provide any additional information if necessary, or also say that you actually did not measure your emissions. Moving on to the final category, response and reporting. Here, I would like to briefly touch on the definition of remedy, the means to counteract or make good a negative impact or provision of remedy, again, taken from the GRI standards glossary this time. So essentially, where companies identify that they have caused or contributed to adverse impacts, they should contribute for or cooperate in the remediation according with the UNGPs, for example, and also an effective remedy requires directly seeking the perspective of the stakeholders who have been harmed, involving the identification of the stakeholders which suffered harm and which harm from which business activities, as well as identifying any underlying root causes. Here, the stakeholders' perspectives are central in the remedy discussion. So again, keyword stakeholders, which includes both internal and external, and is not limited unless specifically explicitly stated in one of the questions. Here, an example, within the reporting period, has the company been involved in providing or enabling remedy where it has caused or contributed to adverse impacts associated with the following human rights and labor topics? So you can see that you can select whether you have not identified or caused an adverse impact, or yes, maybe you have identified but not actually provided any remedy, or you have identified and also provided or enabled remedy. And again, if you like, you can provide any additional information and elaborate on this. Some examples that we have for remedy that might be relevant here. So this can include apologies, financial or non-financial compensation, prevention of harm through injunctions or guarantees of non-repetition, punitive sanctions, whether criminal or administrative, such as fines, restitution, restoration, and rehabilitation. And again, this really depends on the context of the situation, which remedy should be provided. Another response and reporting question type example here for anti-corruption: if actions were taken in the first question on the top half of the screen, you will see the bottom question, otherwise you will not. So the first one is asking, within the reporting period, what actions has the company taken to address suspected incidents of corruption? And then you can select all that apply, for example, internal measures, external measures, or again, if no actions were taken, you can also select that. Then if the next question is triggered, you can elaborate on what triggered the actions that you've taken. What were they initiated independently by the company or in response to dispute or an investigation by public authorities? And then again, you can select the answer that suits the situation and elaborate depending on whether the answer listed is not 100% suitable, for example, and you'd like to elaborate on how the answer has been interpreted for your company. This is also another example of a response and reporting question for environment. So here you can briefly describe additional relevant practical actions taken by the company. And this is more of a very narrative text and also optional, as you can see on the top left. So really use what is applicable to your company, or maybe you don't have any information yet, but we'll only have it next year. Then you can share it in your COP for the following year. Then I would like to briefly touch on the Forward Faster reporting. So some of you may have already heard of Forward Faster, maybe you haven't. We don't actually have any Forward Faster reporting companies here with us today, so I'll just briefly touch on this. This is for establishing goals that foster trust, stay ahead of evolving sustainability regulations, and meets changing market expectations is also imperative. This is why this Forward Faster was launched, which is a global platform, credible, ambitious corporate action aimed at guiding our companies and where you can make the biggest impact by 2030. Because right now, only 17% of the SDGs are actually on track for 2030. These 5 areas of action have been selected because they have the power to accelerate progress across all 17 SDGs. So we have living wage, gender equality, climate, water resilience, and finance and investments. So depending on whether you might choose to commit to one of the Forward Faster initiatives here, that means that all companies that have signed on to the initiative in 2024 must submit a report in the 2025 reporting period. And we also have here, similar to the communication progress that is not related to the Forward Faster reporting, we have a grace period. So essentially anyone that signs after June 30th will be able to submit in private mode, which means that nobody will be able to actually take a look at your communication on progress. However, if you joined in 2024 by June 30th, then you will not be able to have this option, but will be reporting regularly with everyone else. So if anyone is here today who joined last year after June 30th, that means that you will be able to submit in this private mode. Here also a brief overview of the targets. For example, we have living wage, which target 1 states that 100% of employees across the organization earn a living wage by 2030. Or we have, for example, target 1 for climate action, where the Forward Faster initiative accepts both net zero commitments and validated science-based net zero targets, as long as these commitments and validations have been officially processed by the SBTi. So you will not have to report directly. It's more of an indirect automatic response that takes place. Then I would like to touch on the digital COP platform. So here we have a brief insight into the COP platform. You can access this via your company's dashboard, which should look something like the screen on the left-hand side. And then you can click on Complete 2025 Communication in Progress, and the platform will appear, which will look something like this. And then you can select either the Communication in Progress introduction or the CEO statement of continued support, depending on whether you want to get started but don't have the continued statement of support yet. Or if you have both, you can also just, so you're really flexible in selecting whichever you would like to get started with. Also note that the platform is available in different languages, so you can choose between the 6 UN official languages up here. Then we have the navigation. So if you'd like to change your submission type, maybe initially you think you want to only upload a sustainability report and would actually like to submit the questionnaire, or the other way around, then you can navigate on the left-hand side to 2025 Communication in Progress Introduction. And like previously mentioned, here you have the R1, R2, R3, and so on questions. And you can then change your submission from only upload a sustainability report to complete the digital questionnaire, for example. If you decide to get started on the questionnaire and then actually don't want to submit it and decide to change to complete, to upload sustainability report, note that any data in your questionnaire from the COP will be deleted and won't be shared in the submission. Then we have an example of what a successful COP submission looks like. So here you can see Georgia Capital as an example. This is on their public profile, which is what yours would look like too, of course, just with the different name and details. You can see here their 2025 communication on progress. And by clicking on this link, it will then open a different page, which I will show you in a moment. But before that, I also want to point out that there you can see that it has been successfully submitted. So if you have a doubt whether it was submitted, you can also check here very easily. And you can also see here that this company is active. So starting after the submission period ends, August 1st, this would actually say non-communicating if you don't submit anything. And going back to clicking on the 2025 communication on progress on the bottom left, you can then see that this following page is opened, and then all the details of the questionnaire are listed below. So you can see the categories of the questions, and also at the top, you can see the time period that is relevant for the communication on progress that was submitted. Again, I would like to point out briefly here, ideally you would have something that is 12 months long and not 6 months of a reporting period, for example, and also ideally for the submission for 2025, you could use, for example, January 1st to end of December, 31st of December, 2024, or you can also use the financial reporting years. So that would be April 1st till April 1st, 2024 till March 31st, 2025. And I would also recommend that you try to stay consistent here, as it will allow better benchmarking for you. On the top right, you can see the printing option. Here you can download in your desired PDF, for example, and save and use it for next year's submission comparison, for example, if you prefer to have the documents, or you can just access it again as you're able to access it online, as you're able to see previous submissions as well. So this is really up to you. Then some good to know points regarding the COP digital platform. Just keep in mind that every mandatory question must be answered in order to submit the questionnaire. All answers will be saved automatically, and you can easily log out and return to the COP at a later time. Make sure that you carefully review all COP responses prior to submission. Then also there is multi-user access available, but we do not recommend that you use the platform simultaneously. So really make sure that there's one person accessing the page at one time and not at the same time with someone else, as this might lead to issues with the data that is last saved. Then we have the COP responses that cannot be comprehensively previewed before submission and can only be downloaded in PDF format after the submission. So this is what I was showing you earlier. You cannot download any progress that you're making on the platform. Hence, we do really recommend using the PDF and Excel available to prepare any data and information prior to submitting your COP via the digital platform. All portions of the COP, so we've mentioned the statement of continued support, the digital questionnaire, the sustainability report, and optional additional attachments, they will be publicly available on the participant profile, again, unless submitted in private mode. So do keep this in mind when you're uploading any files, that you are uploading the correct files. Moving on to the key feature, the data visualization. So here I would like to briefly show you how you can access the COP data visualization tool. There are two options. You can either go on our communication on progress webpage from the Global Compact Network Switzerland and Liechtenstein. So you have a link here to the website, or you can also go via your participant dashboard. And I'm not sure if you can see it, maybe it's a little bit small, but if you select on your participant dashboard COP data visualization, you'll be able to see the data viz tool as well. So for example, to benchmark your organization's responses against those of other cohorts, you can do this via logging into your dashboard, and you can see this quite well here. For the question that you submitted, it will highlight what your response was and compare it to, for example, on the left-hand side, the region is Europe, and all sectors. On the right-hand side cohort actually has region, all, and sector, electronic and electrical typical equipment so you can see and compare to these other cohorts and really work with what is interesting you in that moment. And also note that this feature is only available to our participants and also only for your own company to benchmark and see which answers you have submitted. So this is in that sense anonymized. Then we also have the features where you can explore other questions where, for example, just 2023, you can also use year over year. So there's really a lot of flexibility in terms of how you can work with the DataVis tool. You can browse by topics, so governance, human rights, labor, and see what your competitors or your peers are answering, and maybe also now with the success stories, learn from each other and see how you can improve, and of course benchmark against yourself and others. So this is a really nice tool where you can also download the pages that you are interested in, for example, and we recommend that you view on Tableau Public to access this tool for the best user experience. Yes. Then preparing your report. Here I would like to just briefly summarize what you should get started with. So confirm your COO's continued support of the 10 principles of the Global Compact, then review the questionnaire, use the COP guidebook to answer any questions or just for support. Again, like mentioned, there's calculation guidance and a glossary of key terms that's also very useful if you're unsure about how to interpret certain terms. Then begin your data collection process, and you can use here the list and overview that we have in the resources section, followed by ensuring that you have access to our dashboard in order for you to be able to actually upload your COP questionnaire or sustainability report and statement. And for any additional questions, you can also refer to, for example, the 2025 questionnaire frequently asked questions document. Here, a quick summary of key elements. I think we've overloaded you with quite a lot of information during the session. You can see here again the summary deadlines, the submission periods, which started April 1st and last to the end of July. There is no option to extend the deadline, and there's also the grace period of non-communicating to the end of the year. The elements include the minimum submission, which is a CO statement, and the completion of the COP questionnaire or sustainability report upload as an alternative. There are the 4 sections: governance, human rights, and labor and environment, and anti-corruption. And then we also went through all of the question categories, question types, which are materiality, commitment, prevention, performance, response, and reporting, and also the specific key figures that were listed in the performance section. Regarding the platform, this is a digital platform. There is an electronic confirmation of the CEO statement. There is an automatic saving mode available, and you access the platform via your dashboard. Keep in mind that material changes need to be submitted within 10 business days, and after that, you cannot make any changes. Here, the key tools that we have, the key resources, of course, will definitely be the questionnaire and the questionnaire guidebook, followed by an overview of all the resources we have. We've noticed that it can be quite overwhelming, especially if you're doing this the first time. And also we have a lot of resources. So we have created these tables within the next slides that really provide you with a good overview of all the resources that we have. So in the follow-up email, we'll make sure to share that with you, and then you can ideally start with this and check what are all the resources that are available and maybe what is the purpose or description of that resource and where do I want to get started. So you can see here, these are the key COP resources that are publicly available. We have the COP policy, the COP amendment policy, and then, like previously mentioned, the questionnaire and guidebook. And also maybe, I don't think I mentioned this previously, but we also have Excel templates of the questionnaire, not just PDF. And all of these are available in different languages. So for example, if you prefer French, then you can also find that. We also have the CEO statement template, which looks something like the image that you can see below. Then we have the COP frequently asked questions. We also have the COP questionnaire frequently asked questions and an online frequently asked questions tool. So just take a look and see where what might be the best place to search for an answer. And of course, if you can't find the answer to one of the questions, you can also reach out to me, and I'd be more than happy to settle the question and also reach out to the GCO if it's something to do with the platform or maybe more technical as well. Then we have the COP data viz resources, so the data visualization. Data viz is what we call it. We have the tools, the COP data viz FAQ also, and we have a really nice instructional video, which I'd also recommend for you to use in case you haven't used the data visualization tool yet and are new to it and a little bit overwhelmed, which can happen quite easily for the first time when you're using a new tool. And you can also see specifically where these resources are located, whether it's the COP webpage, the Academy, or so on the right-hand side of the table. Then we have the COP Readiness Hub, which is exclusively available via the Academy COP page, which is a great tool, and I'd really recommend you to look into. You also have the questionnaire, the guidebook, the policies, and so on available there. We also have the link to COP courses, and again, the supporting materials, and really everything's there too, in case you're trying to find something. So we have the supporting materials that are exclusively available via the Academy COP page listed here. There are also COP digital platform guides and walkthroughs. We have, for example, what will be relevant in your submission if you're confused, the 2025 step-by-step submission guide, and again, the digital platform demonstration video also for that. What might be interesting for the questionnaire itself in terms of content is the COP questionnaire deep dives on the Academy for each thematic section. So you have a series of deep dive videos that are presented by the heads of each issue area teams from the UNGC, where they go and dive deep into each individual question to explain it to you in case you're having any issues or kind of need someone to guide you through the questionnaire when you're completing it. We also have the COP questionnaire subject matter overview, which is presented by subject matter experts, for example, from the ILO. Then we also have information sessions. Annie will briefly mention some of them at the end, where you can also ask individual questions. You can also view the recordings and slides or of the monthly Q&A sessions if you missed them or just want to get better insight what has been discussed in the past and might be applicable to you. I would also like to point out the interoperability resources that we have. So the field of corporate sustainability reporting is rapidly evolving, as you might all know. And we as the UNGC are, of course, committed to supporting you in navigating this very complex process to achieve successful and comprehensive results. So therefore, the UNGC and organizations such Global Reporting Initiative, so GRI, and Impact Management Platform, IMP, the International Financial Reporting Standards, so IFRS, and EFRAG, the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, have been working on enhancing the interoperability of these international frameworks and related resources. The COP is, so the COP questionnaire specifically is aligned with these frameworks and serves as valuable preparatory tool for companies required to perform more rigorous reporting as a tool. I do recommend you look into this in case you're interested. For example, we have the COP ESRS mapping tool, which was developed by some country networks, where each ESRS data point is mapped corresponding to corresponding data points in other reporting standards or frameworks, such as the COP or GRI. And you can also see in the guidebook and the questionnaire itself, which question, if you have, for example, used GRI in the past, might be relevant to address that same question. So you can get data from previous reporting that you have if you're using GRI, for example. And one more point that I'd like to make is that the COP questions are designed in accordance with the UNGPs as well, and further supporting comprehensive and reasonable corporate transparency. So we really tried to make it very easy in terms of having an overview of everything that's going on in terms of international frameworks as well. Then I would like to go into a quick frequently asked questions that we've received, hopefully answering some of the questions that you have. For example, we joined in 2025. Do we have to submit a COP this year? So I mentioned this previously, if you joined in 2025, you do not have to submit a COP this year. We've also received some questions that they joined and would actually like to submit a COP this year. This is unfortunately not possible, so you do have to wait until next year. And related to the private mode, this is only possible if you joined in Q3 and Q4 of 2024. We've also received a question from one of today's attendees, which I would like to answer now, which is, we are a subsidiary, do we have to submit a COP? Annual COP submissions of parent companies are automatically applied to all subsidiary participants linked within the Global Compact digital system. So if this link exists, then this will take place automatically. If it does not, we can make sure that this will be in the system and update the system. Then another question we've received, what period of time should the information in the COP cover? So we expect companies to complete the COP using data from the most recent closed data collection process. So ideally, this data would not be, for example, from 2023. And it would ideally also cover a 12-month period that ended within the 12 months prior to the submission of the COP. We've also received a question regarding SMEs. So do they have to answer the same questions as large companies? Yes, so this questionnaire has to be answered by all participants, no matter whether you are an MNE or an SME. You will receive the same questions, but you can, of course, like mentioned, there's the additional text box where you can add more information. You can also select not applicable and really make the questionnaire work for you. Then we also had a question regarding the new COP format and whether it fulfills the requirements of the CSRD. So no, it does not fulfill the requirements of the CSRD, but rather we've made sure that, there's interoperability that I've mentioned previously, that you can use the COP mapping. For example, if you've answered, you've reported according to CSRD already, and you want to understand which questionnaire question might be relevant, then you can use the mapping tool. Do all questions have to be answered? The answer is yes. However, this is only relevant for the mandatory questions, and again, on those that you've selected as material. So only then will you be able to complete the COP if you have answered all of those questions. How is the new communication on progress related to other reporting frameworks? So I've mentioned this a little bit previously. So for example, you can see where the questions are linked to GRI on the top of the questions and which specific points will be relevant there. And also, again, the COP mapping might be of interest to check to better understand the interoperability, GRI, ESRS, and so on. Then one more question we've received, can I export the completed questionnaire as an Excel or Word document? Unfortunately, this is not possible. So this is why we do recommend that you use the PDF and the Excel and then complete the digital platform questionnaire just by copying manually the data that you have. And then once it's been submitted, you'll be actually able to download the questionnaire. Can the questionnaire be filled out in Excel and imported into the platform? Unfortunately, that's also not technically possible. And can I make amendments to the COP after submission? So like previously mentioned, you have 10 business days to submit any amendments, and this can include, for example, corrections of material misstatements, rectification of inaccurate data at the time of submission, and this does not include updates based on the availability of more recent information, however, which should then actually be reflected in the COP the following year that you're submitting. Replacement, removal of irrelevant supplemental materials uploaded unintentionally is also included or can be considered. Make sure that you initiate these within the 10 business days. You can either reach out to me directly or to the COP responsible team, and then we'll make sure that this is done within those 10 business days. And also keep in mind that these amendments can only be made to the most recent submitted questionnaire. For further details, you can also see the 2025 amendment policy, which specifies which amendments can be made and are accepted. Then I would like to move into the questions and closing. Are there any questions? I know it was a lot of information and I'm not sure if I spoke too fast, but please let me know if you have any questions at that moment. Are there any questions, Annie? I'm not sure.
No, not that I can see in the chat.
Perfect.
Still digesting.
Yeah, I think it was a lot of information, and usually the questions come when you're working with when you're working with the COP, and then you kind of notice what is important, or maybe you're having a technical issue with the platform, and that's when you really notice what you would like to ask.
We have one question which is raised in the chat, Tabea.
Can last year's report information be pre-fulfilled on the platform for 2025? So no, unfortunately, it does not carry over data. That's why we recommend that you work with the PDF, and then you can transfer it manually, unfortunately, for the time being. But we are always welcoming feedback, and there will probably be some changes regarding the platform in the near future, and hopefully you'll be able to transfer that data from a previous submission. Thank you for your question.
Medina, could you please, can you please help? How do I know which questions are mandatory?
Okay, so this is where I would really recommend that you use the PDF, and it concretely guides you through which questions would be mandatory. So once you see that you'll be answering one question, it will let you know whether it prompts other questions, so that will make sure that you know, okay, if I answer this option, this next question will pop up, which will then potentially become mandatory. So I think the easiest way is by using those guidances in the COP questionnaire that are, I think, always in light blue shade. I hope that answers your question, Adina. Also, feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to directly ask a question. Great. Also, if there are any topics maybe that you're not so familiar with yet, we have many tools that we would be happy to share with you. For example, if you are working on business human rights topics that you would have to be reporting on, and you can tell that you would like to have some improvement, we, for example, offer the Business Human Rights Accelerator, which would help you go that extra step for the next year, for example. So, or also academy trainings, e-learnings, and if you're looking for those and are unable to find them, we can share those as well.
We have another question from Haro. Can we have a GRI report? If I'm correct, we can upload this and skip the questionnaire.
So we do accept the sustainability report in place of the questionnaire. And generally, we just recommend, as long as you touch on the 10 principles or the SDGs, which the GRI does as well, you can upload that in place. If you've never submitted a sustainability report or don't actually have one yet, then it's also a great way to get started by using the COP questionnaire. And then you can build on this gradually and really grow over time. So this is also actually a great opportunity for SMEs, and for larger corporations, it's also useful simply because you can benchmark yourself with other UNGC participants and also learn from each other. Do we have any more questions, Annie?
I can't see anything
No?
more.
Okay.
No, not for now. No.
Okay. Otherwise, I'm also happy for you to reach out to me via email. I'll make sure to include all the information. I'd also really recommend going through the resources list in your own time, as it is quite a lot to digest. Also, the information from before that. Take some time to look through it, and then in the follow-up email, you'll have my email address and we'll be able to directly pose questions to me at a later date as well.
So if there's no more questions for the time being, then I'll jump on to the next slide. Oh, back.
one. So if you need further support, the COP team are offering office hours in July and August, and you can pose more questions there, and you can register online. And finally, we have just to highlight some events which may be of interest to you. So we have a 3-part webinar series on managing risks in the supply chains, and it answers questions like how does your business model and sourcing strategy cause or contribute to social and environmental risks along your value chain. And it uses a case study approach. And this first section will be looking into the sporting goods sector. So a great series. We also have our very popular briefing on regulatory trends, and that's designed to help support companies navigating these regulatory changes. And finally, we have a 4-part webinar series for SMEs. They're 4 short 30-minute sessions, and they're designed to help SMEs map their priorities and define their strategy, implement meaningful actions, and report on progress effectively. So yeah, please look on our website and join and register soon. So if there are no more questions, please reach out to us. We will be forwarding you a recording afterwards, as well as the slides. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us, and specifically to Bea or the COP team. And remember that we're here to support you in every way possible. So thank you very much for attending today's session, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.